Hey, it's Mazzy here. Welcome back to the channel. Buy my outfit today, and this Macon's hat from New York from maybe 15 years ago. You're probably going to guess who I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to expand on this. I want to present several recordings, reissues, alternative outtakes, transcription recordings, archival recordings of two just amazing artists. Obviously, Frank Sinatra and Nina Simone. Very different in their styles, very different in their presentation, very different in their politics. Maybe there was crossover early on, but after that, very different. And I'm not going to talk about the political side now. I am not a Sinatra expert. So if you're coming here, you're one of those Sinatra geeks. And I have found Sinatra geeks, like Bob Dylan geeks, like Beatles geeks, like so many others. They're so into the history, and I'm not like that. I grew up listening to Frank Sinatra records. My parents did to some extent. In the 1970s, I would buy his records. Of course, I'm that generation that probably prefers the Capitol issues, but I've gone back to the Columbia years, and of course I grew up during the Reprise years. And in terms of my compact disc collection, I do have a lot of the Reprise and Capitol proper albums on CD, and I have these wonderful comps that came out during the height of the CD era. The Columbia years, the Capitol years, and the Reprise collection, the Reprise years. And these are great just overviews, just to give you a taste of the music, not deep dives, but most people aren't into deep dives. And one of the collections here, obviously, is a deep dive into the archival side of that, without controversy, with controversy, I should say. Well, we'll get there in a minute. I'm going to do the opening act of Nina Simone. Now, for me, Nina Simone is probably the most played out of these two. As much as I love Frank Sinatra, when I grab a record, I tend to pull a Nina Simone record before I pull a Frank Sinatra record. This is a reissue that just came out, an expanded archival reissue. Nina Simone, A Single Woman, the complete Electra recordings. In 1993, her last album, A Single Woman, was put out on Electra Records. She went back into that Sinatra, that Billie Holiday type of style recording with a big orchestra. And you have a lot of that in here, but you also have some other detours. Now, this is from Omnivore Records, and this just came out recently. And this is a really delightful, cool record. Now, I first got into Nina Simone in the 1970s, or RCA stuff, and especially that Here Comes the Sun album. And some might say, oh, this sort of jazz, pop, crooner, classically trained piano player doing the pop standards. She's incredible on that record. Dylan and Beatles and the stuff she did with the Bee Gees covers, and she made them hers. And obviously she wasn't afraid of putting herself forward. I did see her when I was very young, and she's political as hell. She really kind of goes directly towards her audience when she plays, and wears her politics on her sleeve, and her racial issues and social issues that she basically lectures the audience a lot. But I just love that. Of course, I went to her early Bethlehem recordings as well. Now, I'll talk about this album. What a beautiful cover photograph this is. It's a double record set in a single sleeve. You have this wonderful portrait of her. And there is a little talk back between some of the outtakes on this. And there's a wonderful essay in here, The Complete Single Woman, The Complete Electra Recordings. And this is an essay by David Nathan, and this was written in July of 2025 when it was first published. And it really kind of talks about these sessions and the whole genesis of this record. I'm not going to relitigate that or tell you about that. Buy the album and read it. Nina Simone works with a live orchestra. She's crossed over with blues and gospel music and jazz and folk music, and done an incredible job and an incredible presentation. Now, in terms of the recording and the production and the arrangements, there's a very lush style, especially to side one on this, with a single woman, lonesome cities, if I should lose you, the folks who live on the hill, and love's been good to me so far. Very beautiful and lush and orchestrated and large in scope. The dynamics on this record are wonderful. My guess is these are from digital cuts. I don't know in terms of the mastering details, but it's a really well-pressed, well-presented record. Side 2 surprised me a little bit because it takes some different directions. And when I saw the title of the first track on side 2, I was a little taken aback and almost cautious of my of listening to it. It is Papa, Can You Hear Me? And of course, the schmaltzy over-the-top Yentl, not lentil, Yentl Barbara Streisand song from the soundtrack. But the way she presents it, I tell you, I like this version better than Babs. There is more soul to this version, and it's really a beautiful arrangement. So my trepidation before I heard this was resolved, and I had a sigh of relief once I heard it. I'm not going to even attempt to produce a second song, the French song. I really like the arrangements more on most of the tracks on side 2, which are less orchestrated. Now, of course, when we get to Sinatra, it's lush and orchestrated all over the place with Nelson Riddle and, of course, those live tracks, the Hollywood Bowl and beyond. So there is that on side 1, but side 2 has a minimal amount of that, a more interesting, folksy, Parisian, and rhythmic arrangements for the most part. Just Say I Love Him is beautiful. The More I See You and Marry Me. Just beautiful renditions, beautifully presented. And this is a record I missed. In 1993, I never grabbed this record. I never got the CD. Would have been the CD era. I don't even know if it came out on vinyl. Probably not. But this is a kind of a nice take on these songs. And again, I am close to an all-in Nina Simone person. Obviously, her Verve records are classics. I have box sets. I have the RCA CDs of box sets. I mean, in terms of the compact disc, I have all the box sets. I think there's one called For Women, it would be, which is just a stunner. And again, I just like her soulful, gospel, jazzy renditions of popular music. And like jazz artists, where they take the classics, the songbooks, she does it, but she pulls out more. You know, when Sinatra did something and he pulls out a pop song, it almost seems disingenuous for him doing it. It just seems like he's reaching out, or some producer pushed him into that, which, what Frankie wants, Frankie gets. So usually you can't talk him into doing anything that he doesn't want to do. What's really brilliant on this, side 3 and side 4 are the outtakes. Now, there's a couple of truncated songs, a very short version of the Times They Are Changin' that's less than a minute, but she's working on it. You can see she's working out, and she's she's not someone who doesn't understand Bob Dylan. She's interpreted Dylan beautifully in the back, way back in that RCA album. I believe she does Just Like a Woman, which is a stunning version of it. She does a really kind of nice version, and it has obviously the reggae beat, Bob Marley of No Woman, No Cry, Do I Move You. But side 3 opens up, and there's a lush, big orchestrated version of The Long and Winding Road, which I think is really a nice version. It was left off the proper album initially. It wasn't initially on it, so it's on the outtake. And she does it beautifully. I can totally see why they took it off. As a Beatle fan, I know the lushness of that song. McCartney always talks about he hated all the Phil Spectorization, adding the harmonies of the choir and the orchestration, yet he will go in that direction and make it sound like that arrangement. And I think it's a good time. One of my favorite songs on here, and it just seems like a surprise, but when you really stop and think about it, she does a cover of Prince's Sign of the Times. My favorite Prince album is Sign of the Times, the double album, and she does a great version. It's almost a little, if I say rap, that'll discount the greatness of her version of it, because it's not a rap, but she speaks it in those lyrics. If you know the lyrics of that, it's a very kind of urban, political, dark song by Prince, and she beautifully does it. There's a couple of boogies on here, and the arrangements are stunning. There's Baseball Boogie, which is on side 3. At the very end, the last track of the album is a 1-minute instrumental version of it. So the rhythmic movement of the band is really good on that. And I really actually kind of wish she had also done maybe another album in pairing with this original album. I almost wish she did one that's more pared down, an alternate without the orchestration of these other tracks. Again, like No Woman, No Cry, like The Times They Are a Change, and like Signs of the Times, because she is one that challenges these original versions and does them extremely well. Another cover, she does an alternative take here. I'm going to write down and write myself a letter. And that's an excellent version too. So the outtakes, in some ways, if I was to edit this and transfer it, I would edit the proper album with some of those outtakes and make a perfect album. But aside from that, overall, it's an album I'd never heard, and I just love Nina Simone. So this album on Omnivore Records, Nina Simone, A Single Woman, the complete electro recordings, is really wonderful. It goes through the track list and who plays on every track. Now let's go to Frank Sinatra. So let me start out with this box set. Now this is for Sinatra freaks. This was sent to me by Sing. They do these armed forces radio broadcasts that they release and they have access to. There is some controversy about ownership, copyright from the Sinatra estates. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to go over that. People are into Sinatra. I think these are valuable recordings that have been restored and stored the best possible. But these are impeccable performed Sinatra pieces here. Sinatra at his peak, his early peak, his first generation of pop stardom. He comes out of the big band jazz era. He records these. Again, I am not a Sinatra expert. Someone's going to chime in probably and tell me more of the things that I am missing here. But these are from Armed Forces Radio Network recordings. That's why Sing has access to these transcription things. And they really range, they really run the gamut of the quality of them. But again, the performance is the key here, and the performance is amazing. When I was listening to these 5 LPs, I followed most of them in this booklet. And there are wonderful essays in here and descriptions, not only of an introduction, but it goes through each song. And there's a paragraph, or several paragraphs, on each segment of the recordings. It starts out an Academy night at the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra, Johnny Green conducting, and this is the Hollywood Bowl. This is basically a benefit. Frank Sinatra was an idol of radio. This is pre-television. This is, obviously films, but he wouldn't be in films till somewhat later. This is where radio made an artist. And Frank Sinatra arguably was the biggest radio star of the day throughout the 1940s, throughout the World War II as well. Each segment throughout this set has a series of anywhere from 2 to 4 to 5 songs. Transcripts, again, from the Armed Service Broadcast Network to radio, to CBS Radio, to others that were available in transcripts. And again, sometimes you have the screechiness of a recording that hasn't been cleaned up too much. You don't want to take away from the essence of the performance. But the performance, again, I keep coming back to that, are the key in here, because you're not going to get a pristine recording. Obviously, some are better than others. You have CBS Hit Parade, Sinatra in concert again at the Hollywood Bowl, an NBC performance in 1950, and another one on CBS, Frank Sinatra with Graham Forbes piano and unidentified small group, and that's in 1950. I really like that a lot too. And he has a command of these standards. He has a command of these songs, which we know from his entire career. LP4, side B, kind of ends the proper series of performances from my point of view on this. You have Broadway Melody, and this was Frank Sinatra, Joe Bashkin and the orchestra, featuring Dagmar, ingenue, female vocalist. They had done one sort of pop gimmicky song. Apparently it's a lot of Sinatra fans think it's one of the worst songs. That's not the one they sing here. They only do one collaboration here. But this was a performance that was only broadcast to French radio, and you have a French MC doing it. And it's a stunner. Now, 1951, he's waning in his popularity, remember. he's waiting for another hit, another series. Things were changing then. Obviously, this is early days of, this is R&B and rock and roll. All the jazz R&B stuff, the boogie woogie stuff was crossing over, the Louis Jordans and obviously even Nat Cole and stuff. But different times, different place. And so his popularity was waning. Of course, about 2 years later when he signs to Capitol Records, there'd be a big comeback to Frank Sinatra and Capitol Records. When I said LP4 was the end of the proper album for me, it's because LP5 is a whole different thing. It's like basically a Christmas album. It's a radio broadcast of a CBS station, and he does a medley and a whole series of Christmas songs. So you could take that aside and make it a proper Christmas album. Obviously with Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, Jingle Bells, Let It Snow, Baby It's Cold Outside, and so on. A great Sinatra. So 5 LPs we have here, and they're all different in terms of the quality of the recordings and the transcriptions and the transfers and things. But I tell you, they did a pretty good job based on what they had to work with. So if you're a fan of the early Sinatra, the pop icon, and the beautiful ballads and his early phrasing of the songbooks, this is an incredible performance. And I was surprised how much I enjoyed that entire 4-hour listen. And we have a variety of color vinyl. There's a little bit of a turquoise there. We have a kind of a deep mauve. Then there is a marbled gray. Deep purple. And for Christmas. So this 5 LP set, Frank Sinatra, Long Ago, Far Away, is an archival, a deep dive that really is for Frank Sinatra diehards. But you hear him at this young age, at this height of his pop, his kind of teen idol initially, popularity, but you see him growing as an artist and doing these amazing performances of these new songs of the time that would become pop standards, pop classics, that would be recorded not only by him, but other artists like Ella Fitzgerald, and we have obviously Billie Holiday, Nina Simone. Years later, he would hook up with Nelson Riddle and others, and it's just a great tour of this time, of these 8 years, these World War II and post-war years in American pop radio. These are radio recordings. These are radio performances when radio was the sole, initially at least, way to present an artist, just as a few years later when television was coming in to the forefront and would somewhat replace it to a point. But people would sit around the radios and listen to these kind of performances along with their story and their dramas and their comedies. And a young Frank Sinatra, this period of Frank Sinatra, his personality is so different and unique, but so tempered than the Sinatra we would see and hear later in the late 1950s, especially into the 1960s and beyond. So Frank Sinatra's Sing, this is the 5 LP set. There is that sampler of the Hollywood Bowl to check out. So of course now a record that a lot of people have been waiting for, the Tone Poet edition of In the Wee Small Hours. Originally on Capitol, 1955, considered the first concept album, Frank teaming up with Nelson Riddle. Beautiful series of songs. 8 songs per side. It's got a really kind of slow building movement. Schmaltzy record, but schmaltzy in the best way possible. Like I said with that Nina Simone, with the orchestration and the lush string arrangements. And again, Frank Sinatra's phrasing on these songs, these moody, slow, simmering songs are stunning. This is curated by Joe Harley. A surprise to some Tone Poet Blue Note fans, because Tone Poet's been primarily a jazz label. Now, I actually keep my Sinatra CDs and my Nina Simone CDs in the jazz section, even though they cross over into a pop world as well. They really have a different directions. I mean, obviously Sinatra comes out of the big band thing, and he's done some albums that are more jazzy than others, but it still has a little bit of that somewhat DNA. You're not hearing the long solos. He's not considered maybe like a Johnny Hartman jazz artist or, some of the others. But them going from an alternative tape they found that has rarely or never been used to cut an LP, it did a really wonderful job. Now, I no longer have any vintage copies of this record. I don't have a 50s copy of it. And so I can't compare it. This is not a shootout video. I have it on compact disc. I have probably maybe a late 70s into the 80s pressing of it, all analog still, before the CD era. And I did play that, and it doesn't have the same warmth to this record. Now, again, this is not a shootout. Other people may do it and compare it, and people who know this record, who have that original, will make their personal decision on it. But I tell you, this is a really beautiful cut and pressing of this record. I've read somewhere where some people think it's a loud cut. I don't think loud in terms of dynamics or loud in terms of, quote, the loudest word. It isn't that at all. It is pretty comparable with, for instance, that other record I showed by Nina Simone. It's comparable to a lot of those records, but it's a record I want to turn up on my stereo, on my Spender speakers and my Hagel amp. It is, tonality-wise, this is a really beautiful record. It's warm. The mid-ranges are there. No highs are cut off, no lows. It seems pretty deep. My guess is the way they cut from tapes, and I know Joe Harley has said this with the Blue Notes, they go now for what is on the tapes. So those Blue Note tone poets we get, the Music Matters Jazz, will sound different than original Blue Notes, because Rudy Van Gelder and the cuts that happened in the 1950s and 60s, there was a compromise, and it was a compromise that people didn't even know was a compromise, where you couldn't have heavy bass parts on there, or sometimes the highs, because they would jump and skip on record players of the day. Now that's different. You can cut and you can be more open, and you can have more dynamics in a record. So you have that in this recording. Again, it's not a comparison, but on its own, this is really a beautiful record. I know the record well. I've listened to it many times. I think there might be some people who like that big swinging Frankie thing. This is not that record. Musically, this is a night cocktail romantic record, or a very early, like Sunday morning record. This is a mood piece. This is like literally a tone poem, not to be confused with tone poet. This has, again, the gatefold sleeves with some William Claxton photographs, a great jazz photographer, on here. And I tell you, they did a really wonderful job on this. Again, it adds to the tone poet label. I think it'd be great if Joe Harley and company and Blue Note expand on this and go more into the Sinatra catalog from Capitol Records, because there's a wonderful series of records around that time. Sinatra's big comeback years in the 1950s. But Sinatra and Nelson Riddle here take these classics, these modern pop standards, and really bring them down and really allow the songs to breathe. That low-key orchestration and Sinatra's beautiful phrasing of songs by some of the best writers of the day, of Rodgers and Hart and Duke Ellington and Hoagy Carmichael. I love Hoagy Carmichael. I want to see a tone poet of that Pacific Jazz Hoagy Carmichael album, Joe. Cole Porter, Harold Arlen. Just beautiful, smoldering, wonderful record, a tone poet. Just a beautiful presentation all around, with this Stoughton cover and everything that goes into the tone poets. And I think what is great about this too, this is going to open those tone poets to a different audience. There's a lot of people that aren't into jazz that don't know the beauty of those tone poets. Now we see these other labels, the pop labels like Rhino High Fidelity and the Universal, the vinyl series, Vinyl Files series, that are doing all organic, all analog recordings. Obviously, Chad Kassem as well, with acoustic sounds and analog productions. But this is great that they're doing it on this level and for a fair price. And it's just a really beautiful record. So thanks for watching. I hope you like these pop jazz crooners. Thanks for watching. Mazzy loves you.